Wow, another great time, another beautiful soul revealing the nuances of life to us. Uh, Doug Lyman.
Yeah, that was awesome. Doug Lynam. I mean, talk about an interesting biography, just Marines, Benedictine monk, and then money manager, wealth management, and then introducing the Enneagram as a tool to enter one's healing relationship with wealth and money.
Yeah. This is one of those great gifts that you get from being with the Moped Outlaws Moped Club. So please subscribe. In this season of giving, please donate to Blast and the Compton Cowboys. They are doing amazing things to help people who really need it. And check out Doug's offerings. There's a lot of stuff talked about in the show. So definitely click through and look at his books, buy the books, go and get your Enneagram done through his website, and just have fun. For goodness sake, have more fun, people.
And be willing to feel some pain.
Right.
Merry Christmas.
Sis, hallo?
Blijven.
Stuur zeker wegen them.
Joh je iets niet, joh.
Two outlaws on the lam, taking the back roads through America.
You can't drink enough coffee for this show.
And now it's time for Monday Madness with the Moped Outlaws, Greg and Mark.
And we're live with Doug Lynam.
Lynam. You got it right the first time.
Lynam. I got it right the first time.
Line them up. Mm-hmm.
I'm so happy about that. And it's really great to have you here, Doug. He, just right off the bat, if you want to get a hold of him, it's Doug Lynam, LYNAM.com.
Mm-hmm.
And he's working on some amazing things, including Taming Your Money Monster with Enneagram.
Yeah.
So let's go, like both Greg and I, obviously, because of our background, we kind of got a sense of that. And I'm sure our audience also has a sense of it. But explain Enneagram to folks.
Oh, well, that's a big topic. I'll try to get you, work your way into it gently, and then we'll go deeper. So it's a system, basically it's a personality typology system. And it basically explains, there's lots of ways of measuring human personality, but it's one of the more robust and scientifically rigorous ones. And if you think of your personality as having two components to it, you've got a nature, which is your DNA or your gene expression, and then you have a nurture, which is how you were raised. And so the Enneagram helps explain the nurture portion of your personality. Like, how did your childhood environment shape your ego defenses, your ways of approaching life, and your ways of basically protecting yourself from the biggest threats in that childhood environment that are very formative and kind of shape your perspective on how you view life in general. And what I've really worked hard with this book is to ground the Enneagram deep in the latest research in neurobiology and childhood developmental psychology. So there's a reason for why the Enneagram works, and we can get into that. But essentially, it goes back to the limbic system and all kinds of interesting stuff. But what it comes down to is there's basically 9 core personality types in the Enneagram, and each of us tend to fall into one of these 9 categories of archetypes of personality. Just think like a car. Like your car is totally unique. You drive a unique year, make, model. The dents and the bumpers and the stains are totally unique to yours. But we could say your car falls into some archetype of style. Like, is it a family sedan? Is it a compact car? Is it a pickup truck? Like, we can put cars in these broad categories. And just like there's only so many ways you can design a car and have it be roadworthy, there's only so many ways you can design a human ego defense structure and have it work, have it function, and be roadworthy, essentially. And so that's what the Enneagram tells you. These are the 9 patterns, and then how that shapes the way you view everything that you go through life experiencing.
Yeah.
Right, so,
and it should be said also that Doug was a Marine Corps officer candidate in 1995 and then turned down his commission to become a Benedictine monk.
Yeah. So that opens up a door. But before we go through that door, this book you've written is about healing one's relationship with money and having wealth in one's life. This might be giving away your book, but in essence, how does knowing one's place on an Enneagram support their relationship with wealth and money?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I mean, it helps to go into maybe give you some specific examples. And so if we could ground it, do you guys know your Enneagram types at all? Is that something you're familiar with?
I don't know mine.
That's
I'm a
okay.
2.
A 2. Okay. So twos. So just for your audience, it's kind of fun to talk about the 2 for a minute. They're often called the helper. So twos are, so each type has what I call a core sacred wound. So look at it like this. When you were born, you had a physical umbilical cord that connected you to your mother, right? And then that gets cut with a sharp knife, and then you're physically separated. You're a physically independent being at that point. But there's a psychological umbilical cord that forms between you and your caregivers almost instantaneously at birth, and it creates a kind of egoic codependence and allows your parents and your caregivers to do most of the driving of your ego for you in the early years of your life. But that egoic codependence has to be cut as well. You have to develop what we call independence. It's through what we call the individuation and differentiation process of childhood.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this requires, unfortunately, sharp negative emotional knives. Just like we need a sharp scalpel to cut the physical umbilical cord, there actually has to be a sharp negative emotion to cut the psychological umbilical cord, because positive emotions will just reinforce that connection to your caregivers. And that separation usually comes in the form of the no's that we receive, like, no, don't touch the hot stove, don't kick the dog, don't throw your food on the floor. Like, there's boundary setting that your parents have to do that are some unconditional rejections of your behavior. Like, we're not going to put up with this forever. Like, you can't behave this way. And that needs to be, those no's need to be backed up with a certain kind of force. And so what we know from the limbic system of all mammals, there's basically three
Okay,
core.
hold on. What's a limbic system?
The limbic system is sort of this mid region of your brain. It's sort of one of the most basic, the most fundamental part of the brain stem, where your core emotions are processed, essentially. And
Yeah,
so,
the amygdala is part of it, and it's the what do they call it? The involuntary nervous system.
exactly right.
Yeah.
So the negative, we have actually 7 core emotions in the human limbic system, and all your other emotions are kind of complex admixtures of that. But the 3 negative ones are anger, sadness, and fear. So anger, sadness, and fear are the 3 core negative emotions. And sadness could also, it's a little bit more nuanced. You could think of it as grief, or sometimes people call it shame. That also can work in the Enneagram system. But anger, sadness, and fear are the 3 core negative emotions. And then there's only 3 ways to process each of those emotions. So when you were a child, if you were a 2, you probably got hit with more grief or shame to back up the nose in your childhood environment. So you experienced. Yeah,
When
go
you
ahead, Greg.
say hit with, do you mean you're experiencing the grief and
Correct.
shame? So it's okay.
It's how you're processing the stimulus around you. Now,
Right.
typically it's because there was sort of shame, like, don't touch the hot stove. I could back that up with anger, right? I
Right.
could back that up with fear, or I could back that up with shame. I could shame you for touching the stove,
You
right?
could
Or
also do it with care, honestly.
of course. And it's important, but sometimes you just gotta fucking yell at your kid because they're not, sorry, excuse my language, but sometimes
No,
you're not
it's
No,
listening.
you can swear
And
on here, but I'm
and you can't.
pushing back hard on this. It has to be a negative cut piece. I think that's
Well,
your own programming operating.
Well, I mean, okay, fair enough, but then give me an alternative explanation for
Well, the
how
hot
we.
stove is fucking harsh enough.
Right. Well, so you can let the
So
kids touch the
giving
stove.
care at that point and saying, "Hey, see, this isn't good, and I'm sorry this happened to you, and let's avoid this in the
But
future."
he's
Right?
talking about a preventive moment. So
Right.
before the kid hits the stove,
Or the
you
kid hits the stove, or
oh,
you don't catch it and they burn themselves. What's their
Right.
emotional response
Right.
going to be?
Well,
Right.
and don't throw your macaroni on the floor. Oh, that was fun. I got mom's attention. I'm going to throw my macaroni on the floor. So I
Right.
get it. At that certain point, the boundary does have to have a quality to it that is very
Yeah.
clear and specific. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So where that bound, hopefully you don't need to get to the negative, but so there's good parenting, there's bad parenting. There's all kinds of extremes. As Jordan Peterson, who I'm fond of, he would often say about parenting is, you want to use the minimum amount of necessary force. Like, what's the minimum amount of force you need to use to police or enforce the behavior that you're looking for. You don't want to
So
go too extreme. You could say no and put your kid in a timeout for 5 minutes, or you could beat them with a belt. Like
Right.
one is helpful and one is unhelpful, clearly.
All right. So to bring Mark's number 2 back to his relationship with money.
Thank you. Sorry, we got off there a little bit. So Mark, if you're a 2, then for whatever reason, you likely got experienced a little bit more shame or grief. It's how you processed got hit with that more as a negative emotion. And there's 3 ways you can take that grief and shame. You can either internalize it, direct it at yourself, which is like giving yourself an emotional wedgie. And that's what we call a type 4 on the Enneagram. And they become the individualist. They always kind of do it their own way. Or you can externalize that grief or shame, and then you become a type 2. And the greatest fear for a type 2 is that they're fundamentally unlovable. And so they're always looking to be very helpful, almost compulsively helpful for others, because they're looking for validation and connection through acts of service to others. And now that's, we all have our thing, right? There's no good types. There's no bad types. When you're healthy in your type, you're great. When you're unhealthy in your type, you're
no, but this
so
tracks for sure.
But for a 2, that would be kind of how it would play out for you over time. And then where that can get you in trouble financially. So I have what I call 2 money monsters for each of the 9 Enneagram types. So for 2, I call your money monsters the bleeder and the bonder. And so one of them is what I call money anxious, and the other is what I call money avoidant. So I'm basing this on what I call the attachment theory of money, which is very similar and completely polarized from the attachment theory of relationships. If anyone's familiar with that. Same thing, just applying it to money and saying essentially when we're unhealthy in our relationship to money, we can be either anxiously attached to it, kind of like Ebenezer Scrooge. We're hyper vigilant, we're hyper obsessed, right? You watch the TV show Billions or Succession, right? You see people whose compulsive obsession with money is causing suffering for themselves and the people they love. It's unnecessary. If they could have a healthier relationship to it, their life would be better, even though they're bringing in piles of it. And then on the other hand, you can have people like who are avoidant around money. They hate paying attention to their bills or doing their budget, or they unconsciously push money away. And then I would say most of us, we tend to fall into one or the other category, but not always. Many of us are what I would say jumbled, like depending on the context. So to go a little deeper here, I realize I'm putting a lot of information out here, but in finance, there's what I call the 4 pillars of finance. So the 4 pillars of finance are going to be earning, saving, investing, and giving. So earning, saving, investing, and giving. So you might be an anxious earner, you make a lot, but you spend everything, then you're an avoidant saver, right? You're not really I meet lots of clients who make high incomes, but everything goes out the door as stuff because they want all the latest bling. Well, great, you're an anxious earner, but you're an avoidant saver. Or people who save a lot, but they're scared of investing. Or people who are great at investing, but they never give anything back to their community. They're avoidant about giving and being using their wealth for love and service, which is what it's supposed to be there for. Mm-hmm. So as a 2, then the anxious money monster is what I call the bleeder. It's like you tend to bleed your money, your time, your talent, your treasure out in service of others, and often at the cost or detriment of your own financial health. And that's one thing for a type 2 to really be mindful of, is like, am I helping because it's the thing to do in the moment, or is it because I'm trying to meet this unconscious need inside myself? And if I am helping, what's an appropriate limit, like before I'm exhausting myself, particularly time wise, and then you get resentful, and then you get bitter, and then you blow up, and it's not good. And then the other hand, there's what I call the bonder, and that would be the money. So I said bleeder would be money avoidant, bonder would be money anxious. Excuse me. And the bonder is kind of tricky with the type 2. And basically what they do is they're sort of using their wealth and their time or their gifts to create codependency in the people around them. So if you think of the story, it's better to teach a person to fish than to give them a fish every day. Well, the bonder type 2 is someone who'd rather give someone a fish every day with a side of tartar sauce and a note that says, you're an amazing, right? So they can keep the flow of gratitude coming at them contiguously. So they're kind of hooked on the dopamine of gratitude that their service is creating, but it's also creating kind of the financial or emotional or psychological codependence of the people around them. And then there's some kind of creating an indentured servant in a way of some sort, and it's really not good for both parties. So that's a quick. I mean, I covered
And there's
the whole
another
book
layer
here.
of nuance here,
Right,
which is
right.
that in the anxious avoidant paradigm,
Mhm.
you can have a situation where the person vacillates
Mhm.
and isn't fixed in one or the other state.
Right.
So depending on the circumstances they encounter, that person can vacillate and have an avoidant response, or they could go the other direction and have an anxious response, depending on the quality or the context of what it is they're dealing with.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Is there a fulcrum in that back and forth that is relational to the Enneagram? In essence, like what Mark just said, with
Mhm.
it depends on the circumstance. He's a number 2.
Right.
Is there a core element that is sort of the center of both those swings?
No, well, the core element, right, would be a healthy, secure relationship to money. That's where the book is trying to get you. It's sort of a dialectic. You've got the antithesis and thesis, and then there's sort of a synthesis of the two. So in the middle would be, if you were to think of it metaphorically, that's the place where your money's secure, where you have a healthy relationship to it. You aren't getting swinging back and forth between the anxious or avoidant.
So you're not trying to heal being a number 2. You're attempting to be a healthy number 2.
Exactly. You're always going to be a number 2. There's no way to stop being a 2. But there is, in the book, what I've done is create an ego map for each of the 9 types. And so you can see your ego map very clearly. Here's the lower levels of your ego structure. Here's the highest levels of your ego structure. And how do you move from the lower level to the higher level? And that's really that's the game that we're playing, essentially.
All right. Here's what I'm curious about. With your experience, the military, especially the Marines, in my mind, is very id based, very masculine, very raw.
Sure.
Okay. Then you become a monk, which in my mind, again, talking about tropes, is all about letting go of the ego, recognizing that it's a fallacy, and that really there's this infinite one that you want to be conscious of.
Yep.
And then you enter the realm of money, which is this huge cornucopia of chaos. What is your experience with ego? Like, how do you define ego these days?
Oh, that's a good question. It's a hard question. What is ego? I mean, because there's healthy ego, and there's unhealthy ego. Like it's really a nuanced. That's a grad school PhD question. But I would say ego is your sense of self and your place in the world, and you need an ego. So the ego, I would say, fundamentally isn't bad. It's necessary to have. The ego is the container that your self-awareness and consciousness that holds your self-awareness and it holds self-consciousness. Now, but too much ego, right? Then it becomes narcissistic and selfish and self-centered. But you still need something to drive. If you're thinking of your ego as the car you're driving around in life and your Enneagram is kind of the shell of that. The Enneagram is kind of the core structure of that ego that creates your ego defense mechanisms. It's like, well, but the idea is, how do we get that car tuned up and running smoothly and effectively and efficiently, rather than having breakdowns or, causing car accidents and fender benders, so that you're actually using it in the healthiest way possible to get to where you want to go and use it fundamentally for a tool of love and service to a suffering world.
So, do you have tools from your experience in the military and your experience in the monastery that you use today to keep your vehicle healthy?
Yeah, I think the military, I had a great deal of respect for the Marines, and they helped me grow up in a lot of ways. And they taught me a lot of leadership skills. And one of the things that I really appreciated about the Marines was their sense of radical responsibility. It's like, it's on you. Like you got to take responsibility for your life, and no one else is going to do that for you. And you can't make excuses. If something goes wrong, they would get in your face. They go, well, why'd you screw up? And the only answer is there's no excuse, right? There's no excuse for the mistakes you're making, especially when in combat they could get people killed. So that sense of duty and honor and service, and esprit de corps, and the Marines really break your ego down. You would think it's very, in a way, yes, there is a strengthening on the other end of it, but there's also, you start by breaking the ego down. and teaching someone how to follow before they can learn to lead. So you have to learn to follow before you can lead, and that's a really important lesson in leadership. So having both of those skills was really valuable for me, and I'm very grateful for my time in the Marines. My struggle with the Marines was just the fact that your job is to kill people for a living, and the frank analysis and realization of that, and just coming to grips with the fact that, first of all, I enjoyed my time there so much, but realizing it was probably unhealthy for me in some ways to have, I say I had some unresolved anger issues, and high explosives are a really bad combination. No one needs another, pissed off, angry young man running around the world with a high powered rifle, shooting things, even if with the sanction of your government. I don't think that that's the best way to live life. So I went from the Marines to the monastery because I was looking for a higher calling. Like, if I'm going to leave this, which is to me a very high calling, what would be higher than that? What would be a step up in terms of, in my mind, at least, in terms of honor and integrity and purpose, that could justify leaving this one commitment for something else that I felt served a higher calling.
There's an interesting mirror here between the devotion of a warrior and the devotion of a bodhisattva.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Both require a sort of level of willfulness and intention in what you're doing, and also the dissolution of the ego's pain body, i.e., the thing that can be manipulated by external forces, and the rebalancing of it in the service of the mission. And whether that mission is defending the tribe, right, which is where the high application of the warrior lives, right,
Mm-hmm.
and then the bodhisattva in provision, right, and the reduction of suffering, the opening of the gateway to enlightenment for those who are choosing to walk through it.
Exactly.
Monastery just implies implicitly, in my mind, Buddhism, but there's all kinds of monasteries. So do you want to qualify what you mean by monastery, and what was your experience? What was the framework for your experience?
Yeah, well, I was a Catholic monk. I was in a Benedictine Catholic monastery, which was very ecumenical, very open. So we studied Buddhism, and we even spent a summer at an ashram in India, a Hindu Zoroastrian ashram there. So, and one of the old senior brothers had a PhD in comparative world religions. So, it was very intellectual environment that was open to all different faiths, but nonetheless was very much grounded in a Christian Catholic, philosophy and theology throughout. So, one of the things you'll find, I think every monk will tell you this, is that if you get a bunch of monks together from different religions, they tend to have more in common with each other than they do with the practitioners within their own faith. So if you get a Catholic monk and a Buddhist monk together, the conversation tends to just sync up very easily. Whereas if you were to put me in a conversation with your average Catholic at a typical parish, it might be a bit more choppy and a bit more difficult to relate.
So what was the exit from the monastery like for you? What was the context for that?
Well, it was very painful. It's a bit like, imagine like you're in an Amish community and after 20 years and you leave. Like, how do you do that? Because, it's your family, it's your community, it's your religion, it's your work, it's your purpose, it's all your friendships. You're leaving everything behind. And so it was really quite difficult. And one of the most painful periods of my life, but it had to happen. I just stopped growing. I felt like I was stuck. The community got very, what we call sclerotic. I was the youngest monk at the time by 30 years, and there was no one new coming in, and there wasn't going to be. And it was clear that the community was dying. Like most Catholic Christian monasteries across the U.S. anyway are closing at a very rapid rate. They just can't. Even some of the biggest ones just can't sustain themselves anymore because there's nobody new coming in. And so, like, what am I going to do? Just be the last one here, stay another 10, 20 years, and then be the last one to turn out the lights and be alone and be then in my 60s or 70s and try to start a new life at that point. It didn't make any sense. So I had to make a shift, and I think I waited longer than I should have. I probably should have made the shift even sooner, but I made my vows and I had my commitments and I felt obligated to them. And I felt like I needed to make sure, everyone was financially going to be okay when I left. And that was tricky to get the community to that point. and that had to happen. That took a long while. So yeah, that's the quick answer to your question.
Got it. And that sounds like there was a lot of grief and sadness and loss as part of that, but also a sense of liberation.
Yeah, I mean, I have more time for meditation and contemplation now than I did when I was in the monastery, which is kind of ironic. I mean, I didn't, because now my schedule is my own. In monasteries, Thomas Merton, a very famous Trappist monk, he would often make jokes about just how busy monasteries can be, because there's so much to do. You've got, we're all working a full-time job. It was a teaching order, so I was teaching. I was the head of the math department at a prestigious private school, so I've got a full load of teaching duties. I've got a full load of monastic duties in the evenings and mornings and services. And then there's meals to cook for everybody. There's laundry to do. There's yard work to clean up. There's just, there's a lot going on and it's quite busy. And so, you don't always have much control over your own schedule. And so now that I'm, on my own, it's like, yeah, I still work hard, but I could just take a couple hours off today and just meditate for as long as I bloody well like. Thank you very much. I don't need to feel like I'm neglecting somebody else because I'm taking care of me.
Yeah. So what was the path that led you to writing the book?
Ooh, well, there's two. So it's a kind of a two-part.
I mean, there's two books or two paths?
There's two. Well, there's two books. So I got a 2-book deal from HarperCollins. The first book came out in 2019. It's called From Monk to Money Manager, a former monk's financial guide to becoming a little bit wealthy and why that's okay. So that was my first book. And it's really it's a how-to. It's sort of everything I wish I had known going out into the world about finance to teach people how to be financially literate. Like, the problem with most people when they deal with money is they're financially illiterate. They don't understand the lingo, the language, how it works. And so when you're reading the business section of the newspaper, it's like you don't know what's going on. It feels like a mystery. And so being able to basically help people become financially literate, understand how do you basic earning, saving, investing, giving, the 4 pillars, insurance, taxes, blah, 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 all that stuff. So it's a good primer. And I then using my stories from the monastery and because when I was in the monastery, I was helping people with their finances as well there. That's another part of the story. So using all my stories from the monastery to use as a hooks to make it funny and humorous and engaging so that people can actually, that's how people learn best. So that was the first book. It's a how-to. It's how do you figure out this nuts and bolts of this money thing? And then the second book is Taming Your Money Monster, 9 Paths to Money Mastery with the Enneagram, which is what we've been talking about so far. That just came out in July of this year. And it's sort of the sequel in a way. They're standalone books, but if the first book is how to manage your finances, this book is about the psychology of money. Why do you make the same dumb mistakes with your finances over and over and over again? What are the pitfalls that you're likely to run into? And then where do you need to get to? What are the spiritual practices you need to engage in so you can overcome these money monsters that are unconsciously sabotaging your financial life in some areas? Maybe not all areas, but there's some part of your financial life that they're causing havoc for you. And how do you overcome that so that you can really be financially secure and be in a good space with your money and then use it as that tool for love and service to a suffering world? So to see it as a suffering prevention tool. And what is that thing that this wealth is going to allow you? What's the crack in the world that God puts you here on this planet to help heal? And how can your wealth now be a catalyst to give you the time and the resources and the opportunity to fix that crack?
Got it. So there's this inherent critique of fiat currency and the American monetary system being focused on the issuance of currency as a result of a debt. And then the idea that capitalism is also inherently problematic because it is enslaving people. And I'm wondering, in that context, do you see money as a monster itself and without people's relationship to it?
No, money is morally neutral. It's like a tool, like a hammer, and you can use it to build something beautiful or whack yourself on the thumb. It's up to you, the user. Or sometimes I say it's like a spiritual sponge. It absorbs the intent of the user. So it depends on the intention of the user. So you can use it for good or you can use it for ill. And so it took me a long time to kind of come to this theory about it, because I was originally, when I went to the monastery, I was rejected money and material. I thought capitalism was evil, thought the whole system was corrupt, and I wanted to get away from it and take a vow of poverty and have nothing to do with it. And I realized that was just really some of my daddy issues I was just projecting onto the world. But what I've come to the conclusion, and I believe St. Paul when he said that the love of money is the root of all evil. Now, when you dig into that quote in the ancient Greek, it's much more nuanced. There's many different words for love in Greek that we don't have in English. So I did a whole chapter on that in my first book. But at any rate, the punchline being is that money, I'm kind of more in the Mark Twain camp these days, where he humorously said it's the lack of money that's the root of all evil. Like the lack of money causes more suffering for people than having money. It's not so much the money itself. The misuse of money, of course, obviously can cause a tremendous amount of pain for others. But most of the suffering that I see in the world comes from people not having enough of it, not having access to it, and seeing the tremendous amount of suffering it produces. Because we now know that the best predictor of your mortality is your socioeconomic status. The lower you are in the socioeconomic realm, the lower your life expectancy is, because you get hit with a laundry list of more horrible things. Because the stress of being poor is unrelenting. It's like walking over a pit of alligators on a tightrope every single day. It's just the stress. So poor people have higher levels of obesity. They have higher levels of alcoholism, drug addiction, domestic abuse, domestic violence, workplace injury, sickness, poor health, down the list. It just goes, all the bad things you don't want in life, they go up as your socioeconomic status goes down. So it really behooves us to try to pull everybody up rather than seeing like
But my point was that inherent with a fiat debt currency is that it's toxic to anyone who's not in the elite class, and that it's designed that way specifically.
I think that's oversimplifying it. I think it's more complicated than that. There's a truth to it. I'm not saying you aren't pointing to a real problem.
I agree with you too, with this idea that what you make of it, it's important what you make of it, right? And slaying your internal money monster is a big part of being financially literate and operating in the environment we're in, rather than just operating in the fantasy of, well, I wish it wasn't like this. I wish the dollar wasn't a fiat currency. Like, that's no use, right? But if I were to ask you this question, you're able to rule the Federal Reserve like an emperor, not just head of the Federal Reserve, but you could reshape the monetary system.
Okay.
How would you do it?
Ooh, that's a hard question. I mean, I'd have to get I would get a council of my best friends and minds together, and we'd have to brainstorm that
What would be the
together.
primary goal, right?
Wait,
Well, I think primary goal would be some sort of
to address the
stability.
inequity of the financial institutions,
so-
right? Hold on, Greg. Hold on. Just hold on.
But I think you two are missing a point. I don't think you have to restructure it. It is a benign element. It's not
buying that.
or.
It is not benign.
No, it's people that are creating the energy that money is flowing through.
I'm talking about a structural flaw. I'll just say it. Nixon gold standard debt instrument. Like, that's the difference. That's the actual science of what we're talking about right now.
I understand your point. I mean, going back to the gold standard is probably never going to happen again.
I actually heard that there was a thing which was going to be
eventually
hybridization of digital and gold as a new monetary standard for the dollar. Yeah. And that as a result, the reset would be like a 20K-X devaluation.
Well, as long as
that's how they're going to solve the $37 trillion debt issue, right?
I mean,
but then everybody that doesn't have, a $200K a year, $200,000 a year, they're going to be
screwed. Well, it depends on what that does to the price of goods. As long as the price of goods and services goes down proportionally, then it's okay. If everything stays where it is, then it sucks.
I have a question for you, Doug, because part of what you are talking about with your books is our neurological system and proven scientific elements.
Right.
It's proven that when one's stressed, one's creativity is hampered, one's ability to be proactive is hampered.
Right.
So if we're talking about people in a poverty level, are there things in either of your books that are tools for a person in that space to strengthen themselves?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that's really the first book is really written to people who are struggling to get out of poverty, struggling with debt, who aren't, again, maybe super financial literate or have areas of weakness they need to address in their financial life. And then I think the second book is written to people of both extremes. It's trying to help people both in poverty, people who are trapped in their poverty, and people who are trapped in their wealth. Because I meet plenty of clients like that who have tremendous amount of guilt because they maybe inherited a lot of money and they feel like that's unjust in some way, and they don't know how, but they don't want to give it up, but they don't know how to, so there's a lot of guilt around people who have money that they maybe felt they didn't deserve or didn't earn. We need people who earn it, maybe felt came to it easily because of their family connections. They inherited a business and they just got lucky, right? And so you find people have money monsters all throughout the socioeconomic spectrum. So I think the first book would be more practical for someone who's really in a difficult spot with nuts and bolts, and then but they both go well together. Again, one's about the nuts and bolts of finances, and one is about the psychology of finances, and they pair well.
Do you personally have peace with your wealth, or is it still something that you struggle? Struggle's not the right word.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I still struggle with it. It's like meditation. Like you could be a Zen master and you can still struggle with your meditation practice. Like it's never ending. It doesn't have a there's no like perfection is not possible. It's about the progress. So it's about I like this thing Jordan Peterson would say in his 12 rules for life. He says, don't compare yourself to who someone else is today. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday.
Yeah.
Like, how are you compared to where you were yesterday? And am I better than I was yesterday? Yes. Am I perfect? Oh, hell no. Oh, hell no. Like I have days, you get that bill that you weren't expecting, you get that unexpected expense, or, something goes sideways, or,
Right.
you lose a job, you lose a client, it's like, oh shit.
Or you just open your eyes and you're just not ready for the day.
Yep.
So you talk about clients. Say a little bit about what that practice is.
Well, I'm an investment advisor, so I help people with their individual wealth management. That's my number one kind of service. And then I also coach. I have a coaching business where I coach clients through their money monsters, through their issues. I work with executives, CEOs, high achievers, performers who are trying to take their business to the next level. They're working through an exit strategy, or they're trying to get their own finances and get their financial house in order, whatever that may look like for them. So I've got a robust coaching practice. And then I do also public speaker. So I do a lot of podcasting, a lot of public, I like to be on stage as much as I can, just kind of get my message out there. And then of course I'm a writer. So it's all sort of marketing funnel for put it all together. And that's kind of my business model for myself.
Is there a God piece to your spirit in this world? Like when you're on a stage, is there sort of this undercurrent of we're all one? And
yeah. 100%. Yeah, it's about seeing the divine inside. The light in me sees and honors the light in you, as we say in yoga practice, right? It's like, and in my theology, and it's just I don't think it matters what words we use with our ape faces to describe the holy, right? I think that's irrelevant. But for me, the symbols is Christian and Christ, and so I think of Jesus quite often and pray to him, and that's my guiding light. But whether you want to use Buddha or Allah or Shiva or Krishna or whatever, it doesn't matter. It's about feeling like Yoda. Well, yeah, if that works for you, man, go for it. I think that we need to not be so. I'm kind of at the point where doctrine and dogma can be helpful scaffolding to get you to that realization that God is everywhere and everyone and everything. But then once you get there, it's kind of like you don't need to hold on to the theology so much. It doesn't. It's the finger pointing at the moon, right? It's not the moon itself.
Right. I just
Bruce
heard
Lee, man, what a guy.
Yeah, I heard yesterday the statement that heaven is in you is superfluous because you are heaven.
Yeah. I'll be sit with that one for a second. Well, yeah, and you're also hell if you're not careful, right? So that's the other side of it.
Well, that brings the point, like you were talking about what you learned in the Marines. You are absolutely 100% responsible for who you are and what you're feeling in every moment.
Yeah. And to take that responsibility and try to, make it better for not just for yourself, but for the people around you.
How have you found the ability to hold that reality and help an individual?
Well, I think it was a lot of it is seeing that, helping them to see that divinity inside themselves through, whether it's through yoga or meditation, or there's a lot of good, psychedelic assisted therapy can help people with that a lot too these days. So that's been a really great tool I've seen work for clients. So there's a lot of different ways of getting at it. Depends on where people are at in their journey. But I think inevitably helping them to see the divinity and light inside themselves, and then being able to operate from that place of love and compassion, and have a lot more compassion. I think the root to having compassion for others stems from self-compassion first. If you're really hard on yourself all the time, it's really hard to be kind to others. It kind of spills over. It's hard to think. I think that comes first, and then learning to have that forgiveness and it's seeing your flaws. And this is where Christianity at its best, it can be very helpful. I mean, we take the whole concept of sin and original sin and confession, and sometimes those things get perverted in weird ways, but the idea that you're going to go and like, oh, I'm going to confess what I've done wrong, and I'm going to ask forgiveness for that, and I'm going to confront that and take responsibility for it. I think that's fundamentally a good practice for people to do, even just with your psychotherapist, right? That's kind of what psychotherapy in part is trying to get at. But when you can practice that, then forgive yourself, and then you can find the space to forgive others, because you see yourself as just as flawed as everybody else.
Yeah.
It's a process of getting out of our own way. That our true nature is always there.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is the environment and the cause and effect laws of the universe clutter up our emotional landscape to a sufficient degree that we get confused and we forget who we really are.
Yeah.
Right. And so the function of a coach, or the function of a priest, or the function of a guru is to liberate us from that illusion that we are our ego. And one of the things I love about Jordan Peterson, what he brought into, stark relief for me, was this idea of identification with something.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Whether that's politics, identity politics is really a big part of the fuel of conflict in our cultural milieu right now, but also nationalism, right? We identify as Americans versus Russians or whatever, right? And we forget the humanity in that.
Agreed. And we forget the God consciousness inside of everyone else around us.
So one of the things that I've encountered is I have close friends for whom the word God consciousness is a trigger, and they become very defensive, and they turn to math, and they turn to the idea of physics and science to say, don't give me that God shit. Like, don't go there. And
Really?
As a math teacher and a man on a path, I'm wondering if you see the universe as empty of the idiomatic manifestations of human creativity in the form of religious dogma, and or whether i.e., is it an empty universe full of cause and effect randomly interacting with itself, or do you think that there is an intelligence?
Oh, I mean, that's a good question. It's a big one. Obviously, I think there's an intelligence. I don't think you can. I mean, that's the thing is people who gravitate to math and science as sort of from an atheistic perspective and want to hold that up as proof that somehow most of the scientists I know, most of the people who are deeply into physics, especially quantum mechanics, many of them are deeply religious. Like, they don't see those things as antithetical. Certainly Newton and Einstein didn't see them as antithetical to each other. They're men of deep faith. And so have been most of the great physicists, Galileo and Ptolemy and Copernicus and Euclid. And like, you go back all the way, it's like these are all men of faith. And because where our science comes from, if you will follow this logical thought experiment, it comes from the faith that there's an order to the universe. And that what's the ordering principle of that universe? Scientists have traditionally called that God. Now, without putting any theology on it, without putting any names on it, but that fundamental order has to be originating from something, whatever that is. Even if you just call it the prime mover of Aristotle, right? The prime mover that sets everything else into motion. That's still a kind of God that needs to be there. Otherwise, as I say, it's turtles all the way down, right? Well, remember the story? Like, what's the Earth resting on? A giant turtle. What's that turtle resting on? Another turtle. What's that? Well, turtles all the way down. That's the answer. Just shut your mind off. It's like at some point you come up to this paradox, like the God paradox, you can't avoid in science. And I think it's helpful to because God is a mystery, and I think theology and doctrine drama can close you down to the mystery if you get too like rigid in it, but it can give you some scaffolding to like kind of give you some place to stand, so you have a perspective from which to kind of view reality, and then you want that to perspective to grow and to shift and to mature, but to take a purely materialistic atheistic world and view puts you at a very dark space. I mean, I've been there. I mean, I've been an atheist at different points, certainly a strong agnostic for many years, and then dabbled with atheism. But I think when people who reject God consciousness or reject the word God, what they tend to be rejecting are stupid definitions of God and stupid definitions of God consciousness. They basically create a straw man argument in their mind, and they're knocking that down, and they're saying, see, it's all silly. It's like, well, but you're taking stuff that's the stupid stuff, and there's plenty of it out there. Where if you take the really intelligent stuff, like, okay, let's talk to the Dalai Lama, maybe, let's maybe maybe Pope Francis was pretty cool. I got to meet him in 2022. He was pretty awesome, listen to what he has to say. People like Richard Rohr is a great Christian theologian. Jordan Peterson is a deep man of deep faith. Like, why don't you go watch Jordan Peterson's biblical lectures. Like he did 16 2 to 3 hour lectures of the Old Testament. You watch that. I mean, that brought me back to my faith for sure. It was a really powerful understanding of what are these texts really trying to say. And when you go deep into the psychology and the symbolism, it's like, this is powerful stuff. This is deep stuff. This is that wisdom that our ancestors have been passing down to us for a reason. And it's not stupid. It can be taken literally, and then it's silly. But if you take it at its deepest metaphorical level, it's got some real profound
it was
truths.
offered as a key to a gateway, and it became a prison through dogmatic practice.
Yeah.
Right. And the perpetual discovery of the personal relationship to the now of the divine nature of the universe that's the game we're all playing, in my view, my philosophy. And Greg and I have talked about this book called The Kabbalion in another context. And so one of the primary things about the Kabbalion is that the first principle is the universe is mental. The all in all is a conscious thing. Right. And I think consciousness is often a metaphor. And we've said it a couple of times in this conversation, God consciousness. We sort of slam those two words together. So when I paint this picture of us being inside this infinite thought pattern, does that resonate with you?
I kind of got lost there a little bit. I'm sorry. My mind just wandered while you were speaking. I think I was reflecting on what I had just said a moment earlier and wasn't giving you my full attention. So could you just reiterate the question for me?
So the all, the totality is mental. The universe is mental, and it's a conscious thing. Yeah. It's like not a brain, because that would limit consciousness to a physical location, but it's an infinite expansion of consciousness.
Got it.
And
so infinite, multifaceted manifestation of the universal consciousness in
which gives us
expressions
created in the image of the creator, right? Yep. Because you can conceive in that same way inside this little skull space. Yep. I have the universe.
Yeah. I'm a fractal piece of the divine, as are you. Yeah. And what's your question?
Can you conceive of it that way? That was my question.
Always. Yeah. That's actually right about in my book. It's that when you think of the Enneagram, right, it's like we're all fractal pieces of God. That's the kind of the thing I'm trying to get you to. So if you look at the ego map in the book for each of the 9 archetypes, the way you're starting your journey at birth is what I would call an unconscious unity. Sort of the axiomatic assumption of my book is that in the womb, you're unconscious, right? But you're in unity with everything you can experience, such as it is. And then you get born, and then you develop an ego, so you can develop conscious separation. So you can move from unconscious unity to a conscious separation. Think of your ego kind of growing up, this cool double cone model. One thing for my book, Taming Your Money Monster, is to know as I wrote it as a picture book. So all the I'm a visual thinker. So all the diagrams come first. and then the words explain the pictures. So I've got these cool diagrams about, as ego maps that I just love to talk about. But think of like two traffic cones stuck together at their base. So at the bottom of the traffic cone, that's where your unconscious unity, your ego's growing to that midpoint, which I would call conscious separation, which is midlife. And then your ego needs to soften mostly through suffering. So we're moving up to the top of that double cone, which is, I think, the goal of the spiritual adventure, which is conscious unity. So we can have conscious unity with God, or whatever word you want to use to make the ape face sound for you that fits your worldview. But I just call it God because it's easier. It makes sense to my brain. So that you're consciously in union with one and everything around you. And then the cool thing about the Enneagram is that the flavor of that experience is unique for each of us. It isn't the same enlightenment that we all experience. The unity is the same, but the flavor of it is going to be very much determined by your Enneagram type and by the core wound that you have going into it that you're healing through that experience. So for a 2, for example, your greatest hope, like your greatest fear, is that you're fundamentally unlovable. So your greatest hope would be to feel unconditionally loved. Right? So that's like when you reach your sort of peak enlightenment experience, liberation experience, moksha, samadhi, whatever you want to call it, what you're probably going to have, the flavor of it is going to be this overwhelming sense of unconditional love. And we can all have that in a psychedelic journey or a peak experience, whatever. But the point being is that for you, it's like God, that spirit is filling you up where you're most empty. And that's the space in you that's the most empty, where for me, it's something different, right?
So how does that impede my relationship with money?
Well, it impedes your relationship with money because you end up basically using money for the wrong thing. We all do the same thing. We have this core wound, and we're trying to use money to solve what's fundamentally a spiritual problem. And so we spend our lives running around to get money to do the thing that our spiritual practice should be doing for us, rather than putting our money in service of our spiritual practice. We're putting our spiritual practice over our money. Yeah, something like that. Does that?
Yeah, I get it.
Right. Instead of money being a tool in the practice, we're making it the practice itself.
Right. So I'll give you an example from my life. So you're a type 2 on the Enneagram. I'm a type 3. I'm a neighbor. So we have a similar wound, but we're both in the shame triad or the sadness triad. But you have externalized sadness. So that, as I said, that makes you feel ashamed or sad about how you think the world perceives you. And that creates your greatest fear of being unlovable. Type 3 has that external sadness, but we also have the internalized sadness. We've got stereophonic. So the internalized shame or sadness makes us feel sad or ashamed about how we perceive ourselves. So I feel this shame about how I think I view myself and how I think others are perceiving me. And I feel shame about how I perceive myself. It's like both. And so that creates the greatest fear for type 3 of not having any value. We feel fundamentally worthless. So what that creates for the type 3 is called the achiever. So we always run around trying to achieve things like, start the business, write the books, run the marathon, get the gold star, get the pat in the head from teacher, because we're always looking for that external validation we want to win validation and approval through accomplishment. So if I win a marathon, you have to applaud me. It doesn't matter if I'm a good person or a bad person. I've won the validation, right? Regardless of my character. And so that's kind of how 3s operate at our worst, right? It's like, go, 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 keep getting the pats in the head to try to overcome this fundamental fear of not having any value or being worthless. And so money, of course, is a great form. For 3s, we tend to equate our net worth with our self-worth. And so we end up on this roller coaster, this hedonic treadmill of more and more and more and more and more. But fundamentally, what the problem is, it's spiritual, it's not material. And the material thing is never going to solve the spiritual problem. And so that's one of the many traps that 3s can get into, for example.
One of the things I noticed as I began to have a relationship with understanding Enneagrams was that at one point I tested as an 8. And I heard you earlier in this conversation say that it's not it's a fixed thing. So what's your theory about why I tested as an 8 one time and then felt more consistently a 2?
Okay, so there's a deep interweb of connections. So if you're looking at the screen that we were sharing, you see those 2 symbols in the corners, the star shapes. right? So if you look at the 2, do you see how there's a line going from 2 to 8 and from 2 to 4?
Yep.
Okay, so 2 is connected. So when we say, and I have a different way of explaining this that I think is a little bit clearer, but the symbols are easy to work with. So if you're a type, if I look at number 2, right, we say when you're under stress, 2s disintegrate to type 8. You start to look more like a type 8 because you have what I call a primary ego addiction. So the primary ego addiction for type 2 is what we call flattery. It's that need to flatter others or appease others or make other people happy. But when your primary ego addiction is a 2 of flattery, it can drive you into a ditch. And what could happen is it's like each Enneagram type has a safety valve. You have your primary ego addiction. Think of it like alcohol. If your primary addiction is to alcohol, right? If you take too much alcohol, it drives you into a ditch. And now I've never tried this before. I'm not speaking from personal experience, but I'm told if you take cocaine with alcohol, it undoes the effects of alcohol, right? So like alcohol is the stimulant to the depressant of the alcohol. So as a type 2, your primary ego addiction is to the flattery, which makes you compulsively helpful to other people. But when you overdose on that, your body has a secondary ego addiction that's like taking a stimulant when you overdose on a depressant, and that's to become like an 8. And that's vengeance. So you tend to get very angry and resentful and push back. And that vengeance is actually good for you in some ways because it protects you from overextending yourself to the point where you've just completely broken, right? So it's like that. It's a safety valve on the compulsive helpfulness for you to sometimes.
But that occurs when I'm at a stress edge.
Correct. Exactly right.
Got
and then
it.
when you're at your healthiest, you start to look more like a 4. You start to move more into the 4 space. You're always a 2. You don't become an 8. You don't become a 4, but you tend to have a little bit more of the freedom and creativity, creative expression. You are less focused on pleasing others and more focused on nurturing yourself. Essentially, it's self-care becomes your primary focus. So then you have something really wonderful to give to others. That's not this overextended.
Not coming from codependence and performative.
Exactly right.
That's brilliant insight, and it's really valuable to me. Again, if people want to get into this with you at a deeper level who hear this podcast, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, reach out to me on my website. Hopefully we'll put the show notes. So it's my website is DougLynam.com. It's my name, and you can get my calendar schedule is there. You can book an appointment with me. You can email me. My email is my name. It's Doug at DougLynam.com, DOUG at DOUGLYN as in Nicholas, AM as in Michael. So DougLynam.com. I'll give you my phone number, 505-695-8623. Give me a buzz. I'm here.
I saw that on your website. I was like, oh my gosh, this guy's very open.
Yeah.
I love that. And we'll put all of that in the show notes so that people can find it either on YouTube or in Apple or the various places. That brings us to, like, is there anything else that you really felt like compelled to offer during this conversation that you didn't get a chance to talk about yet?
Oh no, I mean I can go for hours. You know, I there's no end to it.
Awesome.
There's no end.
That brings us to the question that we ask all of our guests. And it's a deeply meaningful question for both Greg and I. So we really appreciate the way people answer, especially when they really put a little into it, some authenticity. So hang on to your hats, ladies and gentlemen. Those of you who are fans of the show, you know what's coming. Foo Fighters or Eminem?
Foo Fighters.
Do you want to say anything about why?
Yeah.
I like them both. I mean, Foo Fighters' "Time Like These" acoustic version. That's on my top 10 playlist. Like that, just I've got some good memories for that one. But then Eminem's got some good stuff too, man. But I'm not a big rap fan. Occasionally, you know, I do enjoy it, but it's not my go-to. So it's just a matter of style. But like, what are my favorite Eminem songs? What is it? Let me pull up. Just here.
Not Afraid.
Not afraid. That's a great one, man. What else is in my playlist right now?
Did you ever see the version of Times Like These that was done on YouTube with Dave Grohl and a whole mass of guests?
No.
It was during the COVID time when we were all sequestered, and they put out. It's brilliant. It's on YouTube. It's
Foo Fighters Times Like live at live at the Pantages Theater, Los Angeles, California, August 2006. That's like one of my favorite tracks.
All right.
Anyway, and then I got Eminem in here, and I'd be scrolling here through all day.
Doug,
We
what a
talk
treat!
music forever too.
Yeah. What a treat. What a blessing to have you on the ride with us. So much gratitude for the personal insight that I received today about my own biography. And you have no idea how timely this is for me and how this is kind of a Christmas gift for me, in the spirit of Christmas and the season. And thank you, Greg, for tolerating my insistence at various times during this interview. Lots of love to everyone out there, and go find out what your Enneagram is. You might learn something.
And a couple other just little quick plugs, shameless plugs. First of all, there's a really good Enneagram test on my website you can take. It will tell you your type. It's called the IEQ9 Integrative Enneagram Test. You'll find it on my website. So, it's not cheap, but it's worth it. It's the best test out there. It's the most scientifically rigorous one. Most of the free ones are useless. And so that one's maybe about $60, but it's got about 95% accuracy rate. And I really, really, really recommend it. And then if you want my books, of course, they're available on Amazon and booksellers everywhere. So you can find my books pretty much anywhere you go shopping. But my website's got the links there as well.
Got it.
Oh, and so for both Mark and Greg, if you guys like the book, anyone else listening, the biggest gift you guys can get back to me is just to post a review on Amazon. It helps me immensely. Every review makes a world of difference. So if I could ask that favor, I'd be very grateful.
All right.
All right. So buy or sell Bitcoin, Doug?
Well, right now, I just took a big dive, so it's probably a good time to buy.
84 or 88, somewhere in there.
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, I probably hold for now. I'm not doing either at the moment, but it's probably a wait and see moment. But if anything,
I know we're wrapping up, so this could be a quick question. In your money management for people, has crypto been a part of a person's portfolio that you have recommended?
No. It has been part of my clients' portfolios, but all of my crypto stories are cautionary tales. So I don't dislike crypto. I think there's some wonderful things about it. But we could do a whole show just on crypto, frankly. But the question in my mind is it an investment or is it a currency? Because it's very hard for something to be both. And so far, it doesn't seem to function. It's in this weird hybrid, and some of it is based on the greater fool theory of that there's some fool greater than me who's going to come back and pay more than I paid for this thing. That reminds me a little bit of tulips. If you guys are familiar with the tulip craze of the Dutch, right?
Yeah.
So there's an element of that there too, but also there's a stability to it too with the blockchain, which is very impressive. So I'm a big fan of blockchain. I'm very excited to see where that's going to take us in terms of maybe solving the problem of fiat currency down the road. But for now, it's still kind of the Wild West. And I've had a number of clients get burned very, very, very badly on it. And some people have made tons. I mean, I've seen both, but it's tricky. And it's something to just go in as part of a well-diversified portfolio. Let's put it that way.
And just to say that we are not offering financial advice. These are just the opinions of Doug and Mark and Greg for entertainment purposes.
Exactly.